After my grandfather passed away, we inherited his house. My mom told me stories about how he used to hum this old tune as he worked around the house. I thought nothing of it until one night when I woke up to the sound of that same tune coming from the hallway. I got out of bed and followed the sound, thinking it might be my mom, but the house was empty. I haven't heard it again, but every now and then I catch a faint hum when the house is quiet. I was getting ready for work one morning, brushing my teeth in front of the mirror, when I realized something was off. My reflection didn't move. I stared at it, horrified, as it stood there, smiling back at me while I was frozen in fear. Slowly, it lifted a hand, waved, and then disappeared altogether. I stared at the empty mirror, my heart racing. I haven't looked in that mirror since. My childhood home had a creepy basement, and I hated going down there. Late at night, I would sometimes hear footsteps coming from down below. My parents always said it was just the house settling, but the steps were too regular, too slow. One night, I heard the steps again, but this time they were coming up the stairs. I waited for the door to open, but it never did. The footsteps just stopped. After that, we avoided the basement unless it was absolutely necessary. When I was younger, my house had a small, odd door in the basement. I was always curious about it, but my parents warned me never to open it. One day, when they were out, I decided to take a look. I found the door easily and opened it, expecting to find a storage room. Instead, there was just a brick wall behind it. Confused, I went upstairs. But when I returned to the basement a few minutes later, the door was gone, completely replaced by more brick. I still don't understand what happened, but my parents never mentioned the door again. There's a forest near my town that's known for being peaceful and quiet, except at night. Local legend says that if you walk through the woods after dark, you'll hear voices calling your name, begging you to follow them. One night, my friends and I dared each other to go in. We didn't believe the stories, but as we walked deeper into the trees, I heard someone whisper my name. I turned around, thinking it was one of my friends, but no one else had heard it. The whispers continued, growing louder, until we all sprinted back to the car, never looking back. My friend's house had an old, creaky staircase that we avoided using at night. It wasn't the noise that bothered us, but the fact that we'd sometimes hear someone else walking up and down it, even when no one was there. One evening, as we sat in the living room, we heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps slowly coming down the stairs. We both stared at the staircase, waiting to see someone appear, but no one ever did. We stopped hanging out at his house after that. There's an old house at the end of my street that's been abandoned for years. As kids, we'd dare each other to go near it, but none of us were brave enough to enter. One day, as I was walking past, I glanced at the second-floor window and saw an old woman standing there staring at me. Her face was gaunt, and her eyes seemed too large for her head. I ran home, convinced I had imagined it. But every time I pass that house now, I can't help but feel like she's still there, watching from the window. Years ago, I had a childhood friend named Sarah. We were inseparable, always playing together. But one day, she just stopped coming around. My parents said I never had a friend named Sarah, and no one else seemed to remember her either. I thought they were playing a trick on me. But last year, while going through some old photo albums, I found pictures of us playing in the yard. Only Sarah wasn't in the photos. It was just me, smiling at empty air. While hiking with friends, we stumbled upon an old, forgotten cemetery deep in the woods. Most of the graves were weathered and unreadable, but one stood out. A fresh, unmarked grave. Curious, we lingered, but something about the place made us uneasy. That night, I dreamt of the grave, only this time, my name was carved into the headstone. I woke up in a cold sweat, but the feeling didn't leave me. A week later, I went back to the cemetery, but the unmarked grave was gone, as if it had never existed. I was staying in a small bed and breakfast in a quiet, rural town. The place was cozy, but something about the room made me feel uneasy. That night, as I was falling asleep, I felt something cold brush against my hand. Thinking it was just the breeze from the window, I ignored it. But then I felt it again. This time, a firm grip, as if someone was holding my hand. I bolted upright, but no one was there. The window was closed, and my door was locked from the inside. In our house, there was a door at the end of the hallway that no one ever used. It led to a small, cramped room with nothing but an old chair inside. We never thought much of it, until we heard the chair move on its own one night. My parents thought it was just the wind, but there was no draft. After that, the door would be open every morning, even though we always made sure to close it at night. Eventually, my dad sealed the door shut, but sometimes we still hear the chair scraping against the floor. I moved into a small house on the outskirts of town, a quiet place perfect for solitude. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the distinct feeling of being watched. I glanced out the window, and standing at the edge of the yard was a dark figure. It didn't move, didn't come closer, just stood there, watching. I closed the curtains and convinced myself it was my imagination. But the next night, it was there again, closer. Every night since, the figure gets a little closer. I'm too terrified to see what happens when it finally reaches my door. Every night at 3 a.m., I would wake up for no reason. At first, I brushed it off as a bad habit, but then I started noticing a shadow at the foot of my bed. It was tall, unmoving, and always there when I woke up. I tried sleeping with the lights on, but even then, the shadow was there. I finally decided to stay awake one night to see what it was. At 3 a.m., I blinked, and the shadow was right beside me. I haven't slept in that room since. I live in a small, isolated cabin near the woods, so I don't get many visitors. One night, as I was watching TV, I glanced at the window and saw a face staring at me. It was pale, with wide, unblinking eyes. I ran outside to confront whoever it was, but no one was there. The next night, I saw the face again, closer this time, right against the glass. I haven't been able to sleep since, always wondering if it will come back. In my childhood home, there was one door that never stayed shut, no matter how many times we locked it. It led to a small, dusty room we never used. My parents said it was just old and the house was settling, but every night I'd hear the soft creak of the door opening. I'd get up, close it, and go back to bed, only to hear it creak again a few minutes later. One night, I decided to stay up and watch the door. At midnight, it slowly swung open, but this time I saw a shadow slip out. I was house-sitting for a friend who had a large old house in the country. The first night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. Thinking someone had broken in, I grabbed a kitchen knife and went to investigate, but no one was there. The next morning, I found the guest bedroom door wide open, the bed made, as if someone had slept there. But I knew I'd locked that door. I spent the rest of the weekend sleeping with the lights on, and I haven't been back since. Growing up, I had a small closet in my room. At night, I'd sometimes hear whispers coming from inside, faint but distinct. I was too scared to open the door, so I'd just hide under the covers until I fell asleep. One night, the whispers grew louder, and it sounded like someone was calling my name. Terrified, I screamed for my parents, and when they came in, the closet door was wide open, though I was sure I had closed it before bed. I never kept it closed after that. It seemed safer that way. One evening, I was washing dishes in the kitchen when I glanced at the window in front of me. For a split second, I saw my own reflection, but there was someone standing behind me. A woman with long, dark hair. I turned around, heart pounding, but no one was there. I convinced myself it was a trick of the light, but when I looked back at the window, she was there again, closer this time. I closed the curtains and haven't opened them since. I was staying in a hotel for a business trip, and everything was going fine until my second night. As I was getting ready for bed, I caught a glimpse of someone behind me in the bathroom mirror, a tall man with a dark coat. I spun around, but there was no one there. I checked the room thoroughly, even the closet. No one. I tried to sleep, but every time I looked at the mirror, I swore I saw him standing there, just out of the corner of my eye. I checked out early the next morning. I bought an antique mirror at a flea market, thinking it would be a great addition to my living room. One night, as I was walking past it, I noticed something odd. My reflection moved when I didn't. At first, I thought I was just tired, but it kept happening. My reflection would smile when I wasn't smiling, or blink when I didn't. The final straw was when I saw it step out of the frame and walk toward me. I covered the mirror with a sheet and threw it out the next morning. I was babysitting for a family one night when I heard crying coming from the baby's room upstairs. I rushed up, but the crib was empty. The baby was with the parents on their night out. Confused, I checked every room, but there was no one else in the house. The crying continued for a few minutes, growing fainter until it stopped. I never told the family, but I found out later that they'd lost a child years ago in that very room. My younger brother used to make a game of pressing his hands against the windows and leaving handprints for me to clean. After he passed away in a car accident, I found myself missing those little handprints more than anything. One rainy night, I looked out the window and froze. There were fresh, tiny handprints on the glass. I wiped them away, thinking I was imagining it. But the next morning, they were back, just as clear as before. I still see them from time to time, and I never wipe them away now. I moved into a small apartment in the city, thrilled to have my own place. But after a few weeks, I started noticing little things. Doors left ajar, lights on that I swore I'd turned off. One night, I came home to find the bathroom mirror fogged up, as if someone had just showered. Written in the condensation was a single word: hello. I packed up and left that night, never looking back. I recently moved into an old apartment downtown. For the first few nights, everything seemed fine, but then I began to notice a strange smell in my bedroom, like old, rotting flowers. No matter how much I cleaned or opened the windows, the smell wouldn't go away. It was strongest at night, and that's when I began to hear soft footsteps pacing back and forth by the bed. I asked the landlord, and he mentioned that the previous tenant had been a florist. She passed away in her sleep, right in the same room. I often take the late-night train home from work. One night, I sat in an almost empty car except for a man sitting across from me. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, his head down, hat obscuring his face. At the next stop, the train paused, and the man stood, walked out, and vanished. I didn't think much of it until the conductor passed by, muttering, "He always gets off at that stop. Every year, same day." I looked out the window. There was no platform, just overgrown tracks leading into the dark. Late one night, as I was flipping through TV channels, the screen froze on static. But behind the noise, I heard a voice whispering my name. I leaned in, and the voice became clearer. "I'm coming for you." The power cut out immediately after. I ran to the breaker to flip it back, and the house came alive again. The static was gone, but the voice still echoed in my head. I unplugged the TV that night and haven't turned it on since. I was babysitting for a family one evening, and the kids were already asleep. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps upstairs. Thinking one of the kids was awake, I went to check, but they were both fast asleep in their beds. As I turned to leave, I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway, just out of the light. My heart froze. I ran downstairs, called the parents, and locked myself in the living room until they got home. They swore no one else had a key, but I never babysat for them again. I worked late shifts at a hospital, and every night I'd have to take the elevator down to the parking garage. One night, the elevator stopped at the 3rd floor, even though no one had pressed the button. The doors opened, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing there, a woman, pale and motionless, but as I blinked, she was gone. The elevator doors closed, and I rode the rest of the way down in complete silence. I've heard other staff talk about seeing her too, but no one ever mentions her name. I was staying up late, watching TV alone. The screen flickered a few times, and then it went to static. Annoyed, I got up to check the cables, but as I turned back, I saw a face in the static, pale, with wide, staring eyes. It didn't move, just watched me. I turned the TV off immediately, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched all night. I don't watch TV alone anymore. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more.